Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the board of directors, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both which can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I have a couple announcements. During coffee hour in the garden, Roz will be selling scripts, which will be going to general fund, right, Roz? Sunday, September 8th, we're going to have a ministry lunch. Sandy will be contacting the ministry chairs. And you could try to get people to help you. It'll be like human resources. Tina has, before I go on, Tina has an announcement.
Good morning. I see a lot of unfamiliar faces, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Tina Porter. I was chair of our ministerial search committee, and I just wanted to give a brief update. I know we have a minister now, and we're so excited about that. So as the chair of the Ministerial Search Committee, I have tried to keep the congregation informed through our many years of search. I believe we started in 2018, before COVID. And when we started, we did surveys and conversations about what we wanted to see in full-time ministry, and 2 things were very clearly stated. Long-term ministry, i.e. more than a year or 2, and that they live within the community. I told you that was what we were looking for, and I know that that was in the front of the search committee's mind. However, the times have been crazy through this search, through this many-year search. And when we shifted from a settled minister search to a contract ministry search due to the restrictions of COVID, many of the opportunities for those specific conversations were eliminated. And because of people contracting COVID when face-to-face meetings would have occurred, we lost even more opportunities. When I learned 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? No, it was just last Sunday, that Pastor Tom had found a home in Hyde Park, I too was surprised and a little sad. I've had many conversations this week with Pastor Tom, with board members and members of this congregation about this issue of his living in Illinois rather than in Northwest Indiana. I would invite you to contact me, Pastor Tom, or Sandy Waters with any questions you have. I would like to invite you to recognize the opportunity that full-time ministry will afford us, and to understand what kind of presence we can expect from Pastor Tom now and as we move into a many years of his service here. Again, this was a miscommunication I take full responsibility for, and I hope you all will look forward to those opportunities with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And today, our minister, Pastor Tom Bozeman, is in the pulpit. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that portion of the service. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Due to the high transmission of the latest COVID variant, we ask that masks be worn by in-person attendees. If you don't have a mask, we can supply you with one. Please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Now please silence your devices and take a deep breath and another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
What a beautiful way to start the morning. Please, if you would join me in lighting the chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrow, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of a life we share together.
Our opening words this morning from our hymnal, Robert French Livens. Holy and beautiful the custom which brings us together in the presence of the Most High, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones in absence, to give thanks, to make confession, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of ages, the cathedral music of history. 3 unseen guests attend: faith, hope, and love. Let all our hearts prepare them in place. I invite you to join in some song.
For the opening hymn, we'll be doing something a little bit different today. You'll bear with me. It's a song called Courage, and it's a call and response, so I invite you to rise. You're willing. So the words are courage. Courage. My friend.
My friend,
You do not walk alone.
you do not walk alone.
We will
We will
walk
Oh, I should have told you to please remain standing. Please remain standing and join me now in our affirmation of faith. The words are printed in the laminated handouts in the pews and in your order of service. We will follow this with greet your neighbor and the doxology. The doxology is also in your order of service and on the printed handouts. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between us.
Each week, we share joys, concerns, sorrows, milestones with one another, knowing that in doing so, we weave the fabric of this community ever stronger. So, do folks have any joys, sorrows, concerns, milestones you'd like to share? And as you share, please share your name with us so that we know who you are.
Hey, I'm Joe. Good morning, everyone. Our story today is by Eliza Davy Permain, but it's a story from the Hindu tradition, and it's called The Bag of Gold. As our story begins, Shiva and Shakti, the divine couple in Hinduism, are in their heavenly abode, watching over the earth. They are touched by the challenges of human life, the complexity of human reactions, and the ever-present place of suffering in human experience. As they watch, Shakti spies a miserably poor old man walking down the road. His clothes are shabby, and his sandals are tied together with rope. Her heart is wrung with compassion. Touched by his goodness and his struggle, Shakti turns to her divine husband and begs him to give this man some gold. Shiva looks at the man for a long moment. "My dearest wife," he says, "I cannot do that." Shakti is astounded. "Why, what do you mean, husband? You are Lord of the universe. Why can't you do this simple thing?" "I cannot give this to him because he is not yet ready to receive it," Shiva replies, and Shakti becomes angry. "Do you mean to say that you cannot drop a bag of gold in his path?" "Surely I can," Shiva replies, "but that is quite another thing." "Please, husband," says Shakti, and so Shiva drops a bag of gold in the man's path. The man, meanwhile, walks along thinking to himself, "I wonder if I will find dinner tonight, or shall I go hungry again?" Turning a bend in the road, he sees something on the path in his way. "Aha," he says, "look there, a large rock. How fortunate that I have seen it. I might have torn these poor sandals of mine even further." And, carefully stepping over the bag of gold, he goes on his way.
I'm going to read a poem by John Keats called La Belle Dame sans Merci. It's a ballad. It's written for two voices. So when I do the first voice, I'm going to stand right here. And when I do the second voice, I'll move over a little bit this way so you can tell the difference. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, so haggard and so woe-begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest's done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose, fast withereth too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long. For sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy song. She found me roots of sweet relish, and honey wild and manna dew, and sure in language strange she said, "I love thee true." She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four, and there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamed on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans merci hath thee in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloom, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hill's side. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering, though the sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing.
Last Sunday, we sang a hymn that we haven't done before as a whole congregation, and we're going to do it again this Sunday. So 1043 in your teal hymnals, and there's a couple of parts to it, and we've got some musical support to help make it happen, and I invite you to rise and body your spirit to bring this into life.
So the first part is the Transylvanian lyrics, and then the second chorus is the second line, the part two.
Does everybody remember the pronunciation for the? Okay, great. So let's practice this. So on the left-hand side, on the bottom there, it's got a little pronunciation key for the Transylvanian. So I'm just going to read each line and invite you to say it back to me. So that first one there, hal heat aut seretet.
Hal heat aut seretet.
Beautiful. Hal seretet aut beke. Perfect. Hal beke aut aldash. Great. And then hal aldash aut ishten. And then hal ishten aut suksheg ninshen. Beautiful. So it's as simple as that. Since the words repeat themselves, it gets a little easier to pick it up. And that's also why we're doing it a few weeks in a row, so we can kind of get the hang of it.
Great. Yes, so Dick, the first time we'll all sing that Transylvanian together. The second, we'll sing, the second time we do it, we'll sing the English through. And the third time together, the Dick side of the room will lead the Transylvanian, and Maggie's side of the room will lead the English. So, just to add another layer of complexity onto it. It's actually pretty simple though. Here we go, all together.
Beautiful, beautiful. Glad we're learning this one together. So we are in the third week of our 5-week series, and broadly, August and early September, which is the part we're in now, we'll be digging into reflection and self-examination. And then once we get into late September or October, we'll get into the next series. We'll reap the things that we've picked up, the things we've noticed over these first 5 weeks, and get into setting intentions for the coming year, taking actions to resolve whatever is lingering from the past year. And in our society, this sort of process of looking back and looking forward happens at the turning of the Gregorian calendar most often, New Year's Day. But in Judaism, there's a different mind frame, one that I think often fits congregational life quite well. The time for self-examination being when things are still warm, when there's still a lot of light, but gradually less and less. Take this off. We're already headed toward the winter months. Of course, historically, the weather patterns that inspired this process were a bit different. The Hebrews were a desert people, and this was the driest time of year. And so the time when one should take account of one's relationship with the deity that might decide whether there was enough water or not was this time. But for our purposes, in our time and place, the fact that we are headed toward the cold months, when we huddle indoors, when the scope of our attention and awareness might naturally drift inward, and the fact that the congregational year is getting going again after the usually lighter summer months means that now is a good time for us to take account of our relationship with the world, with one another, and with ourselves, to settle up accounts before the natural world starts to feel less and less hospitable. Both Jews and many pagans celebrate their New Year's in the fall, just as Jews consider the day to begin not at midnight, not at some arbitrary time on the clock, but rather at sunset, at the time when we take a break from having access to the life-giving energy of the sun. So the first week's homework, I like to give homework in our worship services. The homework from the first week was a couple of questions. How do you want to be remembered, and what is most important? And then last week we got into this first little bit of really sinking our teeth into things, of taking stock of our lives. And so I offered a series of questions in that direction, and I invited you to just pick whichever one fits you and spoke to you the most. What do you notice is falling away? What brush needs to be cleared in order for new growth to occur? From what suffering have you been distracting yourself? In what ways have you been dishonest with yourself? What tug do you feel just under the surface in your life? And this week, we'll start to dig a bit more deeply into that sort of inquiry. The month of Elul in the Hebrew calendar entails a month of reflection along these lines. And there will be 3 weeks between this part of the series and part 4. I'll be out of the pulpit for a couple of weeks, so we'll have 3 weeks to really get into it and see what we can dig up. So my hope this morning is to set you up well for those intervening 3 weeks, to have enough to sink your teeth into, to really have some time to apply this to your life and discover what fruits come from it. So I don't know if any of you are like me and sometimes use your free time to wander around the shelves in libraries and just pick books off the shelf and see what's inside of them. But I found some really amazing books that way. I discovered the author Anthony DeMello, who's this Indian Jesuit priest and psychotherapist who's written several books, and he has this very particular way of writing that's very to the point and direct. And so he has lines like, "The only way someone can be of help to you is in challenging your ideas. If you're ready to listen and if you're ready to be challenged, there's one thing that you can do, but no one can help you. What is this most important thing of all? It's called self-observation. No one can help you there." And so I read this and I thought, oh, that's so brilliant. I wish those people in my life who weren't very self-observant would start observing themselves. Or then I would get to the line that says, anytime you have a negative feeling toward anyone, you're living in an illusion. There's something seriously wrong with you. You're not seeing reality. Something inside of you has to change. And I would think, I know, these people really need to change themselves. They just don't get it. And then I got to a line where he wrote something like, and as you're reading this, if you have someone else in mind, direct your attention back to yourself. How does this apply to you? And in that moment, I realized that I had been sidestepping what he'd actually been saying. I'd been using his words and ideas to gather evidence for my own position, insisting to myself that if only other people would change in the way that I wanted them to, things would be easier. That was the wake-up call for me. For some of us, it can be tempting to go through life thinking of how other people are doing it wrong. If only they would do it better or differently, if only they would be kinder or smarter or see things more clearly, then things would work out better. For others of us, it can be tempting to do the opposite of that, to go through life thinking of how we are doing it wrong ourselves. If only I would do it better or differently, if only I were kinder or smarter or saw things more clearly, then things would work out better. Each of those tendencies to see others as lacking, to see ourselves as lacking, can serve as illusions which lead us astray. They can protect us from actually feeling our own heartbrokenness at the raw pains that life brings us. They keep us from the truth of life. And if you so choose, this time of year can carry you significantly closer to the truth of your life. This month of Elul that precedes the Jewish high holidays is an introspective one that can include a number of different solo or collective community practices of self-examination. It could be acts of repentance or prayer or charity or scrutinizing your own actions with a view to mending them or excluding yourself from other folks for an hour a day and just engaging in self-examination or devoting more time to fixed periods of introspection and self-evaluation or maybe even complete silence or gathering with others for times of mindfulness. In Judaism, the shofar blows to usher people back into a state of mindfulness. So even having a regular alarm on your phone to remind you to come back to that place. Each of these actions is intended as a wake-up call. In the words of Rabbi Alan Liu, from whom I'm borrowing the titles of each of these sermons, he writes, "Look, pay attention to your life. Every moment in it is profoundly mixed. Every moment contains a blessing and a curse. Everything depends on our seeing our lives with clear eyes, seeing the potential blessing in each moment as well as the potential curse, and choosing the former and forswearing the latter. And since every moment contains the capacity for good and evil, life and death, a blessing and a curse, and everything depends on our choice, this can be a time of year to practice engaging with those moment-to-moment choice points. Among the various practices that Rabbi Liu suggests, I'm going to focus on 3 of them: prayer, meditation, and focusing on one thing. So when we think about prayer, it often conjures a particular thing in our minds. What do you imagine when you think of the word prayer? Asking. Holding your hands, asking. Anything else? Opening. God connecting. Underneath, thinking. On your knees. Needing something. Wishful thinking. Great, yes. Yeah, it brings up a lot of different stuff. We have lots of associations with what this means. So Rabbi Lou writes, the Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah, and the infinitive form of this verb is lehitpatel, to pray, a reflexive form denoting action that one performs on oneself. Many scholars believe that the root of this word comes from an Ugaritic verb for judgment, and that the reflexive verb originally must have meant to judge oneself. This is not the usual way that we think of prayer. Ordinarily, we think we should pray to ask for things or to bend God's will to our own. But it is no secret to those who pray regularly and with conviction that one of the deepest potentials of prayer is that it can be a way to come to know ourselves. Relaxing our ego, opening ourselves to a bigger perspective, a bigger witness on our lives. Secondly, meditation. Sitting each day at a specified time during the months of Elul, we may focus on our breath and our body, holding our body at the balance point between tension and relaxation, watching the breath as it enters and leaves the body just below the navel, letting the belly fill up with breath and then letting the breath go out. And as we saturate these most fundamental aspects of our reality with awareness, we find that we are inhabiting ourselves in a deeper way than we usually do. And gradually this sense spreads to our heart and our mind and our soul, and we find that we are inhabiting our feelings, our thoughts, and our spirit more deeply. And we are filling these things with more consciousness than we usually do. That we are feeling them more immediately, more concretely, more viscerally. In short, that we are coming to inhabit the present tense reality of who we are, coming to see our real moral and spiritual position and what is required of us next. And then thirdly, focusing on one thing. For some folks, a regular daily prayer or a meditation practice is a lot to take on. Getting into that regular rhythm can be a bit much. So just focusing on one thing can be a simpler method. And you won't even have to set aside special time. You can just use the time that you're using already and just choose one simple and fundamental aspect of your life and commit yourself to being totally conscious and honest about it. As Rabbi Lou writes, everything we do is an expression of the entire truth of our lives. It doesn't really make any difference what it is that we choose to focus on, but it ought to be something pretty basic, something like eating or sex or money, if for no other reason that these concerns are likely to arise quite frequently in our lives and to give us a lot of grist for the mill. The truth of our lives is reflected in everything we do, he writes. And if we focus on one small part of it, it brings up the entire truth of it. So we can pray, we can meditate, we can set aside a moment every day for reflection, or we can simply choose one thing in our life and live that one small aspect in truth, and then watch in amazement as the larger truth of our life begins to emerge. Of course, if all the pieces of our life that were ripe for growth were as delightful as bags of gold, this practice of paying attention would be easy and obvious. If everything in our lives struck us at first glance like a blessing, then it would be as simple to just stop and notice as it is smelling some flowers. But so much of life doesn't feel like a blessing. So much of life is heartbreaking. In Western culture, so much of our attention ends up focused on what we like and what we don't like, what's pleasurable, what's painful, what's practical, what's effective, what gets us where we want to go. And spiritually, that can shake our perception of the world, of its life force. It can impoverish us by stripping out so much of the nuance and complexity. In Keats's poem, the narrator is entranced into perceiving a beauty and a sweetness that is not there. And he wakes up to the reality of being on the cold hillside, enthralled. To what are you enthralled? On what resentments or frustrations or grieving or doubts or distrust or any other sort of enthrallment might you loosen your grip? And on what new clear-eyedness might you embark? Nigerian philosopher Bayo Akomolafe often beautifully weaves words to help us Western folks navigate these difficult times in which we live, of political chaos, of looming climate catastrophe. He points a way to stay engaged, to sidestep the temptations of apathy or overwhelm or numbness. And recently, toward that end, he wrote, 2 days ago in Korsør, Denmark, walking through golden fields that swayed with a gentle breeze coming from a nearby beach, a dear brother asked me a question. What's your deepest myth about where we need to go or do as modern citizens today? Embarkation, I replied. I told him a story, Akomolafe writes. When the Yoruba trickster Eshu traveled with the slave ships across the waters to the New World, he perturbed the colonial project, inscribing it with a tense duplicity that rendered the Middle Passage in new ways. By infusing those carceral vessels with his energies, he corrupted the master's categorical objectives of domination. He untied the strings that bound control to power and hid himself in the bloodied wounds of the powerless. What might have been a business operation to capture bodies for the industrial desires of the plantation, a floating jail cell for the captured, became the engorged womb of worlds to come. The hull of the slave ship was now pregnant with black joy, the merry-making rhythms of samba, the tastes and delicacies of creolized futures. The ship was no longer just this or that, it was crackling with strange life. Perhaps most notable about this storied account of the transatlantic is that Eshu did not stop slavery from happening. Indeed, some suggest he actively encouraged it. Working behind the scenes, between the lines, Eshu understood that it is often the case that one must leave home to find it. He offered the Middle Passage as a ritual of co-emergence, an ordeal to break the subject open, a refusal of the events claimed to be one thing. If coloniality is the reduction of worlds to the singular, decoloniality is the refusal of things, of bodies, of objects, of names, of meanings, of histories, of tools to be fully owned, fully known, fully designated, fully available. Decoloniality is the Sabbath in a world that puts us to work, the crack in the sensorial monoculture of the familiar. And today, new ships, vast and terrifying, float at the edges of modern civilization. I cannot help but feel that Eshu is once again composing a rite of passage, Akomolafe writes, working with the elements to break the usual, conspiring to travel to wherever. These times insist on embarkation that doesn't make sense, it doesn't have to. The cracks appearing in the fabric of the known are bio-theo signals that these times call for more than solutions, for more than arrivals, more than justice. These times call for us to lose our way. We have to squeeze into the hull, to crawl into its subaltern belly, and trust that the amniotic work of queerer forces will smelt us into imaginal soup and give us new forms. Now, there's a lot in there. And so I imagine you might be feeling a little disoriented, and that's part of the intention, is that the disorientation allows us the opportunity to reorient ourselves. For hundreds of years, there has been a racist idea that chattel slavery was actually a good thing for the Africans who were enslaved, that it improved their existence of life over what it would have been like in Africa. And as awful as that idea is, it shouldn't blind us to the fact that we humans are able to wring beauty from evil. That from even the most despicable actions and circumstances, we have the power to forge beauty and possibility. And so how can this time of year be a rite of passage for you? How might you need to lose your way? What queerer forces can you entrust yourself to? My homework, my invitation to you over these coming 3 weeks is to try on some of that prayer or meditation or focusing on one thing, to sing to one another a song of courage, to walk with one another as you find your spirit's way home. May we wake up to this home of ours, to see it more clearly than ever before. May we face our ideals and give thanks, make confession, be enlightened, be strengthened. May we re-find the holiness of this planet that is our home and in which we know within our bones we are blessed with love, we are blessed with grace, we can trust the wisdom in each of us, we can see our own face in each other's eyes, we can feel the power of each other's faith. May we gather up the gifts that we are given and move forward together from a more whole place that we can cultivate within ourselves and within each other. And may it ever be so.
Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith in Action ministry and a different charity chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the Chicago Abortion Fund. For those not with us here today, there's an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. And I already have 4 volunteers.
for your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts. We are truly grateful. And now please rise as you are willing and able, and join in singing the closing hymn, 1008, in the Teal hymnal.
Our closing words this morning from Sarah Morris Campbell. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown.
If you would, help me extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Yeah, it's hot. Sit.